Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's Caroline Coram from the Boom Review. I've got Captain Kronos and Annette here from our team, and we're going to be just really covering what's going on in the sky at the moment, what's come before that, and we're going to be looking a little bit at the recent discoveries. Every day we seem to be making new discoveries particularly about what they're spraying in the sky and the effect that is having on us. And then we'll go on to the dietary stuff, all of the fortification, talking about additives as well, which I think is important. So KK and Annette, could you just say hi, please, so I know I've got you?
Hi, everybody. Annette here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Hi, Annette.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Captain Kronos here.
Hi, KK. Good to have you. So I'll hand over to you when we get to the end of each section. I'm not going to be too structured about it, but we're going to be running over some things that people will have heard before, but trying to apply it to what's going on right now, what's been going on over the last few weeks. If I sound a bit breathless, I think everybody is having a few problems with breathing, headaches, stuff like that. And that is all down to this incredibly low air pressure that we've got at the moment, which is then going to high. So we've been going up and down for the last couple of days. We're at a very, very low 985 millibars. That was 98 or 974, I think, yesterday was the lowest. That was very, very low. And I'll explain what that does in a minute. And we're going to be, by the end of the day, at about 1017, so 1017 millibars. And then tomorrow, over Sunday and into Monday, we're going to be rising rapidly up to 1045 millibars. That is very, very high. So we're going from one extreme, very low, to very high after having already been very high. And so we're going up and down in a bit of a roller coaster ride. And it really does feel like that physically at the moment for many of us. And those of you who haven't been following the research that we're doing on what arsenic is doing, what that's doing to the cells, how that's weakening everything, what the metals are also doing to our cells, may be struggling a bit more than other people this weekend. So basically, when we get very low pressure and very high pressures, backwards and forwards, we lose a lot of water from our cells. Arsenic basically holds those cell channels open. So it sticks to the sodium-potassium channel, sticks to the calcium voltage-gated channel, and holds those open. So we no longer have, if we have a lot of arsenic in us, we no longer have control over how those electrolytes go in and out of our cells. The thing that pushes them in and out is things like high and low pressure, lightning, for example, anything hot, anything cold. So, for example, everybody has been very concerned that it's been very cold for the elderly this winter because they don't have their heating allowance. So perhaps they've got their heating a bit lower than they would normally have. Heat expands metal. It also expands the fluid inside the cells. And that makes the metal escape the cells into the bloodstream. And that means that we're going to be more at risk of things like blood clots, strokes and stuff like that. So, and also heart issues. The electrolyte imbalance can cause major problems for the heart, for breathing, for the neurological system, the central nervous system. So that is what is happening. That is why we all seem so unstable. Well, not all of us. Some people seem to be lucky and not have any symptoms whatsoever. But what I did discover, reading a little bit more this week, was that calcium channels are everywhere in our body, calcium and the sodium-potassium channels, because they carry much needed electrolytes in and out of the cells, but also calcium is involved in all of the signaling to the brain. So when you eat, or even when you breathe, your calcium channels need to be open and closed at the right time to send the right signals to the brain. So, for example, I know Owen Jones was very poorly yesterday. I'm hoping that he's feeling better now. But he said that nothing was working. They were trying all sorts of drugs on him. So what I think has been happening for people with really upset tummies, a lot of burning pain, is that they are eating. They've got these open channels that are then kind of, all the metal is then burning the inside of the stomach, and you've got the metal flying around all over the place from outside of the stomach into the, the CNS and everywhere else. But basically, intrinsically, whatever he's eating at the moment is being shaken up in that high pressure environment and low pressure environment in his stomach, which is what's causing all of that pain and irritation. So the cells are very much under pressure. It will be causing quite a lot of cell death in cells that are very full of metal. The other thing that arsenic does is that it prevents the signals for calcium to go in and out correctly. So then what happens is you end up getting a buildup of calcium in the cells. And this is how we become calcified. So you get a large amount of calcium in the cells, and then you get this pressure, and all of this calcium is kind of pressurized all in one go. Then you get the cell popping, the ones that can't cope. And that's when you get inflammation. You might get even bleeding of your membranes and stuff like that. So we've got lots of strategies that we are coming up with to try and reduce the pressure on the cells. That's the main aim here. But just really very quickly to explain how all this calcium is getting into us, and we'll go into this in more detail. I'm going to hand over to the other guys in a minute. Is that number one, we're being sprayed with it. Calcium carbonate, magnesium, potassium, sodium. Anybody who has had a hair test and has a high reading of any of those four, that will be because that has been distributed in the air. You're breathing it into your olfactory bulb, and it's going straight into your brain and into your hair. So whatever you're eating wouldn't necessarily end up in your hair sample, but what you're breathing certainly would. And then the other sources, of course, are all of our foods in the food chain that aren't completely natural, but also some are getting more metals than normal. So plants, for example, are really good at absorbing metals, excess metals in the soil. So, for example, leafy greens and all the brassicas, they are really good at absorbing all of the extra calcium. So when you when you have Brussels sprouts at Christmas and you start farting, that is why. So the farts we thought came from arsenic. They don't. They actually come from excess calcium. So anyway, I'm going to hand over to Captain Kronos to see if he's got anything to say on that, and then we'll move on.
Well, since we first discovered that the calcium problem, I've been on a bit of a mission to try and see what food products calcium is actually in. And I've started reading the back of ingredient products, and it's just absolutely amazing what they put in. Calcium's in everything. And I used to be a really big bread and a really big cheese eater, and I've stopped it. And I think I'm starting to see some benefits. So I think what you say about the calcium is true. How have you been getting on, Annette?
Yeah, not too bad. I don't think I was too high as we discovered this, luckily. Somehow never supplemented with calcium. Was more aware of how important it was to keep calcium under control, the other to do with bones. So we need, bones aren't just calcium and all that. Been an interesting journey to cut out the coffee, the milk in the coffee. That was my only source really of milk, other than in cooking. So, or some sauces and things. So, but done that, and pleased that I have. I just wanted to add though, because ingestion, we think food and drink, But maybe we should just all think and remember and remind other people that what we breathe, we also ingest. So maybe that's partly why some people are not getting, or not wanting or seeing how we are so overloaded. It's hard to comprehend how calcium can actually enter our body and do damage through, ingestion air.
But we're taught that calcium milk, it's so important. I mean it's important when we're children, and you can understand getting that message as a child.
Yeah.
But you can't shake this image of calcium being healthy, being milk, being cheese, have as much as you like. It's on everything. And I think undoing that programming is going to be difficult, because I've stopped. I don't want to have any more dairy, but I keep opening the fridge and the cheese keeps jumping out at me.
Yeah, I know. The thing is also, I think we're being led to believe through supplementation, for certain ailments, like osteoporosis, they push calcium. My mum broke her hip last year, and a big fat pill of calcium, nothing else, just calcium. And that just doesn't make sense. And they should know better than that. So we are bombarded with all this, I would say, they're false. It's not true at all. So if we were to eat, well, of course, if we weren't sprayed with poison, if we were all arsenic free, it would be much easier to manage this. But we are fighting from several fronts, aren't we? Because we're having, we're being poisoned with arsenic and we're being poisoned with metals. And so it's a very clever setup, from that point of view, how this is harming us. And then radiation on top of it, of course. And it's really challenging.
But doctors must know the structure of bone. They must know that with the calcium that you need phosphorus.
I think they do know, but I'm wondering if they kind of forget, because, they go to seminars and they are educated in pharmaceuticals. I don't think they get further education or, continuous professional development. Much what's going on in the body.
Why not have a calcium tablet with phosphorus or phosphate? Put the two together.
Yeah, but then who's at the end of pushing this? What's their agenda?
But the thing is, we're already very, very overloaded with calcium, and if you just put calcium with phosphate, you're still going to have the same problem. It's the whole bottle analogy again of, if you fill a bottle up to the top, you've got to be able to empty it at some point. And if we keep adding calcium, there's no way to empty it. Then the other problem is that the more calcium you add, the more unstable the cells, even the bones, become, because it's almost like they are able to destroy stuff quicker than they can build it. So if you're not adding enough phosphate in your diet, and then you just have calcium-based foods, then your bones are going to be crying out for phosphate to be able to hold that calcium in place. And if you don't, if all you're eating is calcium, and calcium is in every single supplement. I mean, we have just been, it's not just calcium, actually, it's magnesium as well. I've been, trying to find completely metal-free supplements. It's impossible, absolutely impossible. It's either one or the other. But I mean, I've taken the best of a bad bunch, but it really is worrying that, we're being told at the moment, this whole story about the milk, I think it's really not about the milk as much as the fact that we have so much calcium in us that, people are actually dying of having too much metal in their bodies. When this calcium gets shaken up by lightning, it melts the cells. Literally, this is how people die of bleeding, because it is melting the cells. It's getting hot, it's shaking around, it just breaks everything around it. So the message is less about let's freak out about an additive or freak out about it, or I'll talk about that in a minute. It's more about being really aware of the balance of what we're putting in our bodies, and that when you pick up a packet from the supermarket, look at what's in it. If it's got chemicals in it, if it's got metals in it, and calcium is a metal, it's not a bone, it's not a mineral, it's a metal. We really, if you see that on every single packet, but they don't list how much is there, you have no idea how much you're taking into your body. So I think the key message for all of us is to be as natural as we possibly can with what we are eating. And so many of us are going back to that, even though I have to say, after all the up and down of the air pressure, I am now on Lucozade to try and get my dehydration under control. Annette, what do you think about that?
I totally agree with you. It is, that's why we're so far off, because we've forgotten what is natural, and how does our bodies respond. Very many they're not in tune with their bodies, because we learn to trust other sources. I do agree with KK. I'm not saying that it would have been great if calcium tablets had, phosphate in the sense that would save anybody, but it would at least shown that they recognized it only calcium. That's what makes me, skeptical as well. Why do they do that when surely they must know different? But never mind the pharmaceuticals. So I think we're basically, yes, balanced, natural. We're having to almost invent the way forward, how to sustain ourselves, from here on in, and what we're being faced with. It's possible, though. I'm drinking the pineapple, banana, and coconut milk. Yeah, milk, actually. Smoothie. Don't know what you think about that. Have you looked at that?
That sounds great, Annette, I have to say. But I've got some smoothies in the fridge, actually. I might try one of those later. But I veered away from fruit. I think is slightly different from vegetables. A lot of the, the tropical fruits obviously aren't grown here. And Britain does seem to be largely under the cosh in a way that the rest of the world isn't. I mean, the US probably is on a par with us, but they don't add ridiculous amounts of calcium to their flour. I was speaking to somebody early this morning, actually, who was struggling. He was on here earlier. I don't know if he's still on here, but his wife had a migraine, and I said, well, you need to really watch what bread you're eating. It might be the bread. And they went to go and check the flour, because we think of companies like Dove's flour as being really organic and wholesome and fantastic. And they bought a huge bag of this white flour. And because Dove's is quite a big company, it's not exempt from the fortification laws. And so now they have this huge bag of flour with 455 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams. I mean, that's almost your entire daily allowance in just, 150 grams of flour-based product. Is incredible, really. It's just way, way over the top. And I would not be surprised if all of the kiddies having these upset tummies, and all of the, the adults as well, are all down to just a complete overload of calcium. But I'm going to just quickly, if you don't mind, Annette and KK, just talk quickly about those symptoms of both the poisoning, but also with this movement of electrolytes going in and out of the cells. So obviously neurological issues, cardiac issues, and pulmonary issues were definitely something that we're concerned about at the moment this weekend. So people, feeling like they're going to have a heart attack, or having real difficulty breathing, or having migraines, or inability to form words or see correctly. So anything like that, do go to the doctor. A&E. Go to A&E straight away. Don't wait. We're also thinking that there might be a risk of clotting, so look for signs of stroke, and any sudden collapse as well. So do stay alert for that, particularly with people who are vulnerable. The other thing I wanted to say is that we are seeing so many reports of healthy, kind of fairly young people, men and women, collapsing, a lot of men actually, unfortunately, collapsing suddenly from heart attack or respiratory arrest, whatever. And often they will be outside exercising. And this is just happens so often. And everybody, of course, looks first of all to the jabs because that was what was brought up first. It was before we'd done most of our research. And we can connect these events every single time to something to do with the weather or the sky pollution, the sky poisoning. So please don't think that just because you're healthy and you're unjabbed that you are in the clear and it's not going to happen to you. Do pay attention to your body. Pay attention to how you feel. If you're feeling slightly off, just stop, calm down, rehydrate, make sure you know you are centered, and ask for help if you need it. So some of the symptoms from metal poisoning, because this is what it is, it's metal poisoning. So headache, migraine, brain fog, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, gastric pain, neurological pain, cramps, twitches, breathing, pneumonias, coughs, colds, fever, flu. Hot flushes is one I wanted to talk about particularly, because I'd noticed what's happening is that the hot flush tends to start in the stomach area. And I think this is a sign that a lot of kind of middle-aged people or kind of maturing people are getting leakiness in their gut. And so the stomach gets hot because it's full of metal, and then it literally breaks through the mesentery, which is at the back of all of the gut, and into the bloodstream and potentially into the central nervous system. And that is what causes migraines, headaches, hot flushes, just a real uncontrolled feeling of not being in control of your body. So the main thing that we're trialing at the moment, we're not asking people to take any drugs. We're not asking them to take any kind of supplements. You can take supplements. I have 2 basic ones that I take, and I drink Coke, as you all know, and are horrified with. But it does seem to help. Certainly, full fat and Diet Coke seem to help me because they're full of phosphate. And phosphate quickly binds calcium, very, very quickly binds calcium. And because our guts are so leaky, our stomachs are so leaky, if you drink that straight away, it goes through your stomach lining into your blood, picks up that calcium and stops it. Number one, giving you a clot. And number two, giving you a massive insulin dose, because as soon as calcium gets into the bloodstream in high levels, you're going to get a huge flood of insulin and low blood sugar. What else was I going to say? I've gone off track now. I've forgotten there was one thing I was going to say. But anyway, that is also, it's really, really important to bear all these things in mind, that you just literally, we're very, very leaky. And we need to try and stop that leakiness. The best way of doing that is to rein right back on the most damaging metals, which are calcium and magnesium to a certain degree. But calcium for sure is probably one of the most damaging because it is in everything. Magnesium to a lesser degree. And what happens is when you eat those metals, the hydrochloric acid in your stomach ionizes the metal, which means it then can go straight through the stomach wall to wherever the hell it wants and to wherever the weather wants to send it. So when we say we're under the weather, we really, really are under the weather, under the influence of the weather. The other thing that you can do, apart from cutting back on all of those added metals, just cut them right out, is to eat foods with phosphate. So durum wheat pasta, also, we found lots of bread, French bread, that doesn't have any calcium and added metal in it. They are kind of running low, so we need to try and lobby the supermarkets a bit to get them to kind of maybe speak to some bread suppliers in the UK to see if somebody is just going to break the mold and create some bread without this stuff in it, without the calcium and the iron in it, just for the moment if necessary, but just let's get it done, because otherwise we're going to run out of bread. And so phosphate, also meat is okay, but I would go for the pale meat. I would go for chicken and pork because they are lower in calcium than red meat. Red meat is much higher. And also when you pick your cuts, make sure they're not too red, because red shows that the animal is inflamed. And in a minute, I'm going to go on to radiation, because I think that's something we haven't really covered a lot of, but this I think is making people a bit more sick than they would do normally. KK and Annette, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think you just about got it there, Caroline.
Yeah, I agree. And hydration, because we flush less of the extra calcium, don't we, if we're dehydrated as well? So I think it's important to keep the fluid intake up.
Yeah, and you can actually at some point start to take advantage of these weather events so that you end up. So now I'm a little bit dehydrated, but I am with rehydration managing to flush some of all of this out. Just so you're aware, calcium is excreted mostly through feces. 80% goes through feces. So as long as you make sure that your bowel is moving, and one thing to get it going is a big can of Coke. Just down a can of Coke and it will get you to go. Trust me. And you can all shout at me afterwards. I don't mind. I can take it. I'm tough. So keep your bowel moving. And yes, stay hydrated is really important. So the irradiation, somebody asked me, well, how is all this stuff getting irradiated? And I was watching a plume yesterday across the Atlantic, looking at it. It was PM10, which is quite large molecule. It's about 10 microns. And I was thinking, I hope that doesn't get here. Because basically what they're doing is they're dumping particles in the Atlantic, and then they are dumping them so that they blow through lightning, and then that irradiates some of those particles. So with calcium, the two isotopes that are made are calcium 45 and calcium 47. Now, calcium 45 is a beta particle, so it's slightly less dangerous. Only slightly, but it's still pretty dangerous. That has a half-life of 163 days. That means if you ingest that, I mean, a biological half-life is different to radiological half-life. It just means that's how long it pumps out beta particles for. So if you, for example, take in calcium 45 with whichever milk you are drinking, or, it will be a current milk, or if you're breathing in air with calcium 45 in it, you could potentially get an upset tummy and it would go, you might sneeze a bit and then that wouldn't be ingested necessarily. But if you do ingest it and it doesn't make you sick, and you're taking things like vitamin D and K, you could end up absorbing that calcium 45 into your bones. And that is radioactive, which means that if you then are caught out in a storm, the potential for that radioactive particle causing problems in that area of your bone is higher than if you didn't have the calcium 45 in there in the first place. So this is why we're saying at the moment, be really careful with how much milk you drink. And if you must drink milk, just really try and make sure it's from a company that has had it well tested. actually, normally what happens is if milk shows some sort of contamination, it will be pulled from the shelves. So you'll see, from this week probably, there might be a lack of milk in certain areas, depending on which areas were heaviest hit with fog. The second isotope, calcium-47, it emits both beta particles and gamma radiation, and that's more dangerous, but it only has a half-life of 4.5 days, which means that is more likely to make you more sick in your digestive system rather than in your bone. So the one you want to keep out of your bone is calcium-45, and the one that you need to just be really aware of from the point of view of getting things like norovirus, I suspect is created by calcium-47. And that can affect the gut, liver, lungs, and kidneys. Both of them can affect those, but particularly 47, I think, can be quite nasty from what looks like food poisoning point of view. So I'm sorry if I've scared anybody, but that is something I think we needed to share. Now, radiation, external radiation, is different. So if you are out in a storm, we've noticed that radiation can be cast from a storm probably around 500 to 600 miles. So if there is a storm in the Mediterranean, we can feel it here in the UK if you've got a lot of metal in you. The less metal you have in you, or the less excess metal you have in you, the less you will feel it. And whilst they say, 1.5% of your body needs to be calcium and blah, 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 that should be in your bone fixed tightly with phosphate. It should not be wandering around your body causing chaos. 1% in your blood, maximum, most of it tied up with albumin protein. But obviously there are a whole bunch of issues with creating proteins at the moment because of the arsenic. It's a bit chaotic, really, to be honest. And, really the gold standard for avoiding too much arsenic is not to go out when they're spraying. And that is usually on sunny days, which depresses everybody because they're like, I need my vitamin D. I think the vitamin D is a means of getting you outside when they are gassing. Because I hardly go outside in the sun and I'm not ill. I'm getting better and better on this diet, that, this way of eating. I'm going to say way of eating, not diet. I don't seem to feel any different from not having vitamin D from the sun or from these supplements that they're having. Annette, have you got any thoughts on vitamin D? Okay.
What environment it's too risky, and that's what it is. That's why I'm glad you touched on radiation, because most people see the calcium is mentioned and they think, it can't be that bad because it's natural and it's everywhere, and but it's when we put it all together, isn't it? And particularly with radiation, and I think a lot of people, when I explain it, that's when their ears pick up and they say, radiation, what? And then I don't know if they see it better. It's, of course, there's a fear factor, but we've got to be honest, this is what we're facing. But it's absolutely possible to do something about it. It is avoidable, as long as we are aware of what we need to avoid and mitigate. So I think it's great that we've touched on radiation.
Go for it, KK.
So is HIV infection radiation poisoning of the bone marrow?
Could well be. It could well be. Yeah.
Because I've often thought when you look at the disease AIDS, I mean, we know HIV doesn't exist, but when you look at the symptoms of AIDS, I've often thought that looks like somebody who's been in Chernobyl, because they just waste away. They have gut issues.
They look exactly the same, don't they? It's what we are presented as a radiation victim looks like an HIV victim. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that.
Which is shocking, really. He's still there, KK?
Yes, I just switched my mic off.
So from the lightning point of view, whilst it won't irradiate particles in us, if we already have irradiated particles in us, they will make them kind of do more movement. And so whenever a metal moves and it's free, so it's not attached to a protein that keeps control of it, it kind of oscillates around, knocking stuff off things, and causes damage. It causes damage to cells, proteins, DNA, everything. So if you have too much metal in you, then the chances of you getting DNA damage are very high. The chances of you getting a cancer and a blockage and calcification around that cancer are very, very high. So the storms are definitely something to watch out for. Pressure is tougher. It's not as dangerous from that point of view, but it is harder for things like heart conditions, neurological and major breathing collapses. Auroras, again, we talked about this last time. Don't go outside and watch them without taking a mask of some description, because we're pretty sure that that's irradiation as well. Last time there was a storm, I checked, and there was a very, very large storm to the south in the Mediterranean, and that was what was creating this colour. And then the other thing, which is slightly more concerning and harder to track, is there is a war underground, as you know, and we are getting very large energy waves from that war. There have been significant amount in Europe and the UK and in the US, and they are not nice. They basically, whenever I kind of get a headache or something or feel a bit funny, I go straight online to check, is it lightning? Is it carbon monoxide, which is the sign that there's something going on underground? So usually energy. When you start to feel weird, it's energy related, not arsenic. Arsenic you kind of can tell because you'll get a headache quite quickly, or you might have difficulty breathing. But the energy waves are tougher, harder to navigate, and you just get used to knowing what they are and how your body responds to them and what you can do to mitigate. So staying well hydrated, making sure that your gut and your gut is working and keeps working well. You do not want to get bunged up. You need to keep things flowing normally, and also trying to keep your head clear as well. So again, the keeping a real handle on how much metal is in your body is key. If we have a mass, as long as you are having a physiological response to lightning or any kind of energy wave, you have metal that is flying in and out of your cells uncontrollably, which probably means you probably have too much. And don't forget, once you've got if you're eating a normal diet, so you're eating meat, you're eating a bit of fruit or veg or whatever you prefer, and some, non-calcium bread a day, then you are not kind of depriving yourself of nutrients. Those are good nutrients. So you don't need to worry about putting back in loads of calcium and magnesium and potassium or sodium. The one thing you do need to worry about is phosphate, because arsenic mimics phosphate, or arsenate mimics phosphate, and so you end up losing loads of that every time you have an energy wave. So you need to keep putting that one back in. So the durum wheat pasta, the calcium-free bread, the meat, go for those three. Those are really, really key ones for phosphate. And I would say vegetables, but I mean, if you can buy your vegetables, from abroad, great. Or if they were grown undercover, that's also great. But stuff out in the fields, the brassicas at the moment in Lincolnshire, I'm looking at them after having seen them covered in this awful fog the other day. I'm thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to have any of that this Christmas. Anyway, so just to recap on the fortification, so it's 455 milligrams per 100 milligrams of white flour of calcium. That's calcium. So I'm not talking about the thiamine and the niacin and all of that. And I kind of feel that maybe they wouldn't even need to put the thiamine and the calcium in, the niacin in, if they didn't put the calcium in, because we wouldn't be losing all the stuff. The other thing is that brown bread is exempt. All brown grains are exempt from the fortification. And me being the cynic I am, and I've spoken to Annette and Coco and everybody about this, is that we know arsenic is pushed to the outside of plants and seeds and grains. So if we have the husk and the brown part of a grain, we're going to be getting loads of arsenic. So if they then add calcium, then you're going to be really ill. So they only want you to have the arsenic, not the calcium as well. That's the cynical me, but that's how I'm interpreting it. So steer clear of brown anything. You know, you may have felt unwell, but, you know, if there's anything to go by, if you've lived on the continent in Italy or France or Spain, they don't eat brown bread. There's a reason for that. They don't eat brown bread. They're not stupid. The other grains that you can get, so the small mills in the UK under a certain weight, I can't remember which, are allowed to produce flour without the fortification, but check with them in writing to make sure that they absolutely aren't putting it in, because some think they don't have to declare it, but they do. So, you know, on the labeling, it might not include it, not because it's not in there, but because they just think they don't need to put it. So check with them, check with the person who knows at the mill, not the you know, the person on admin. Check with the people who know. And, you know, with these larger companies like Dove's, I mean, Dove's is fantastic. They do all sorts of amazing flowers. So it would be well worth us all just dropping an email to the companies that we really like to use and saying, hey, how about we look at this again? Because they did try and drop the legislation for fortification in 2012, but for some really bizarre reason, it was kept in. And I don't know, Annette, have you come across any reason why that might have... Somebody else was... Zara, you were looking at fortification, weren't you? Can I invite you to speak? All right, I've invited you to speak. So, yeah, Annette, have you got anything to say on that?
Just to check also with the, I use white spelt flour, and I promise it behaves just like white flour. I've used white spelt for many, many, many years. But again, check with wherever you buy it from that it's not added anything to it with the calcium. I don't think it has to here in the UK, does it? It's exempt.
It is exempt, but as I was saying, I don't think that all of them kind of adhere to that. I think some of them might just add it because they think it's good for people. So it's probably the irony, isn't it awful, really, is that people do it because they think it's good for us. They think it's good for us, but it just isn't at the moment.
Gotta tell them and it's not.
It's because we are completely overloaded by every single freaking packet food known to man. KK.
I was having a look at fortification around the world, and I mean, I understand partly why they do it. They do it so that children can have enough calcium. They do it so, you know, older people don't get brittle bones. But everybody else in the middle is just getting swamped.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to wonder, though. You do have to wonder, KK, is it absolute? You know, mother's milk is mother's milk. Your babies would get the calcium from the mother. You know, that the mother is kind of designed to provide that. So
yes, but is the food nutritious enough that she's eating?
Well, actually, now you say that, I was looking at...
Because that's the problem, I think.
No, well, I think there's another problem there, KK, is that we were looking at fortification just before we came on, and I noticed that a few countries in Europe and Russia were providing fortified flours to countries in Africa. So these countries that don't have enough to eat are being given food to eat that's fortified. And so then that compromises what the mothers pass on to the babies. So there is, I think it's a vicious cycle, really, isn't it? It's like you don't know what the real levels of minerals and things are going to be in a human because we haven't been fed normal food for over a century. We don't know. We don't know what the normal levels are. So to say, you need 1.4% of your body is calcium and 1% of that is in your blood and 40% of that has to be ionized. How do you know it has to be ionized? You don't. Nobody does. So I think, there's a lot of assumption based on what people see in experiments, not knowing that we've been undergoing this poisoning for centuries as a human race. This started in Roman times. They discovered calcium. So one of our guys on the channels discovered this. And I think they used it as a weapon of war. They used it they knew that arsenic would open all the channels, and they knew that they could literally turn people to stone. This is what the mythology about Medusa is all about, that you can turn people to stone by, spraying them or feeding them the right stuff. In those days, it would have been arsenic in the water, wouldn't it? And then calcium in the flour. All that time ago, but this has been used for centuries, literally centuries, which is scary. So we have no idea how we would naturally be as a human race, not based on the last 500 years of science, that's for sure. And honestly, prepared to throw the science books in the bin. From what we've been reading, it is incredible. These missing pieces of the puzzle have got everybody tied up with all this really intricate, tiny science, when actually, the proteins don't decide to attach to this or that or the other for an illness. It's rubbish. It just happens coincidentally. Arsenic attaches to sulfur and calcium attaches to bloody everything. It attaches to lipids. This is how plaques form. Is that you've got lipids in your cells, the calcium ions stick to the capillary walls because you've got the lipids right there. Then all the lipids that are flying past stick to the calcium. Then more calcium sticks to the lipid, and that's how you get an overload of plaque in your system. KK, go for it.
I was just looking up a paper, and the title of the paper is Coronary Artery Calcification and Plaque Characteristics in People Living with HIV.
Well, there you go. I mean, literally, it's almost like HIV there has every single condition known to man, doesn't it? It's got cancers, it's got everything. It's horrible, really. A bit like a laboratory of illness. And talking of illness, there's blue tongue at the moment in the Isle of Wight. We know exactly why that has happened. There has been gassing with arsen gas over the Isle of Wight area, Southampton, Portsmouth, that area. And we think there might be magnesium there as well. I was getting some signals to that. I'm not sure if it's magnesium or calcium or both. And basically they've got, so blue tongue is where the cows and cattle get hypoxia. So it's where they just literally have no oxygen. And this is what metal does. If you put pure calcium into water or potassium or sodium into water, you get an extreme reaction. So sometimes it will flame. A lot of the time it will flame. So you chuck that in, it will flame, create massive amounts of heat, and it will split the water into hydrogen and then various other compounds. So this is how also oxygen can be depleted away from the blood. So you can destroy red blood cells. Calcium really loves oxygen, so it can chew up the oxygen really quickly in the blood. So the poor cattle have hypoxia in the Isle of Wight, but also all in various areas around the country. So Norfolk, I think, Herefordshire, places like that. We've also got a case of BSE, which is bovine spongiform encephalopathy, so mad cow disease. That is from the cows breathing in calcium, irradiated calcium. So anything like Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, also looking at things like MND and ALS, could potentially they are, I'm pretty certain, they are driven by this excess of metal and potentially by the irradiated metal that we're breathing in. I hate to say it, but that is it. And I do think ALS and MND, because they are systemic along the whole spine of the central nervous system, I think that is also related to leaky gut syndrome. So you get the olfactory bulb, which absorbs all of the metal in the brain, and then you get the lungs, and then you get the mesentery, which is from the gut. So all of that is part of the whole picture of illness, which is horrific, really, if you think about it. But we're pretty sure that's the way it's happening. And the thing is, we can just pretty much throw all of that initial research out of the window. The only research that we've done, I think, which is really useful, is on arsenic and the way metals behave. So really, we have to understand chemistry more than anything else than we ever did. So if a molecule is changed, so if a metal or an atom is changed in any way, it won't work the right way. And this is how radiation works. It stops things fitting together in the way that they should. So they're all kind of attracted to each other in the right way. And there is a ballet going on in our bodies of everything should be happening in this way and that way. And everything fits together a bit like, not a Jenga, but you know that, what's that game, Captain Kronos? The one where you have to flip the shapes over. I can't remember. Tetris, that's it. So it's like you have to kind of get everything in the right position so it fits. But if you knock bits off of it, it's not going to fit and nothing's going to work. So going on really quickly to milk, I won't drone on for too much longer. And I think also we'll open the floor to questions. Milk is an excretion. Milk is being put out of cows' bodies every day. So their bodies will be used to using it as an excretion pathway. So any excess calcium, which naturally goes to the milk anyway, any excess calcium, including radioactive calcium, will be going to their udders and out into the milk that we get to drink. So this is why you get all sorts of, the inflammation of the udders. I can't remember, it's a specific illness that they get. So the first sign that we would have of there being a problem with the milk is that it not being on the shelf, that certain dairies aren't sending their milk to the supermarket because they take it to a larger place which kind of pasteurizes it. Oh, by the way, pasteurization, guess what that does? That makes it harder for us to absorb the calcium. So pasteurization was done like in the 1800s. So they knew about this all the way back then, that they needed to kind of reduce the amount of calcium. So they've been using calcium for that long, attacking everyone in Europe. It's insane if you think about it, isn't it? KK, did you know that?
No, we spoke about it this afternoon, but I mean, how far back does this go? Are we going all the way back to the Roman Empire?
Yeah, I think so. Naughty Romans, very naughty. It all comes back to Sycamore Gap, KK, I think, doesn't it?
So it's my fault.
Well, we were looking at oats, and a lot of Scots have B12 deficiency, and B12 deficiency is basically where the B12 molecule has all the protein structure knocked off of it that keeps the cobalt in place, and that we think is just literally because there is too much calcium in oat, and obviously oats are very popular in Scotland. Also, the US is testing milk for bird flu, and so we're thinking, well, actually it might be a mechanical bird, which is really not far from the truth, of various sizes. So small ones for arsenic and very big ones for all the metals that they're putting out. They're using a lot of dry ice. You know when fog is coming, by the way, guys, when the temperature suddenly drops the night before, then you will get fog. So just really keep out of the fog if you can. And really, when it's sunny, just be aware. Keep an eye on ADSB Exchange. Keep an eye on our threads. I don't really post the tracks too much. If there's something really, really big, then I'll post that. But you can keep an eye on that online. Yeah, KK.
I've been noticing the temperature drops. It's not something that you notice until you look for it, but it's quite severe, isn't it? It goes freezing cold, and then it really changes quite quickly.
Yeah, we had this really strange episode the other day. We were driving along and, minding our own business. And then suddenly the car just got all foggy. I was just like, what? What's going on? I couldn't see out. I was like, what's going on? I was really struggling to get it to clear. And then like a few miles down the road, it went up again. So I looked at the temperature, and there had been a drop in temperature in a very specific spot. And it stayed that way, where the temperature went up and down either side. It was just the weirdest. And it's all flat land. So it's not like, they could have done anything specific. It's like they'd sprayed that area specifically. Very, very odd. Or there was something underneath it. Arla, the big thing that everybody is talking about at the moment, I did a paper on that. The molecule, if you're a chemist, you'll know that it's actually really not that big a deal. It's a very simple, I don't know how to describe it. It's just got lots of oxygens, some hydrogen, and nitric oxide. So what it does is if you take the nitric oxide away from the molecule, then it's got 3 oxygens left, and that's enough to bind the calcium. And that would, in theory, prevent it from being, I think, floating around doing its own thing in the cow, and therefore may not be included in the milk, or would be made safer in the milk. Nitric oxide, by the way, is really something very, very useful for us. It can be destroyed by calcium and other minerals, ionized metals, but nitric oxide keeps your blood vessels expanded and nice and relaxed, whereas calcium makes your blood vessels really tight and hard, and the blood doesn't flow very nicely through them. So that is the main reason I think they are using that. It's given to the cow in the feed in a small amount. I don't think it's even probably going to get into the milk. So I know people are upset that they're adding stuff and not telling us. I know that. But there is so much more to this. It's about us being poisoned since the days we were born. All of us were born into this. This is something that I think is going to be very difficult for people to come to terms with. We were born into a war, and it started to get very bad around the 90s, 1991, 1992, when it wasn't only Russia, that USSR, that dissolved and became Russia, but also Germany reformed after World War II. The East and West came back together, and then, of course, the whole EU project really took off. So there's a lot going on there. I won't go too much more on that. I don't know the detail, but if you look for all the signs, you'll see that that there is a lot about Prussia flying around the internet. And, just because the country is not there anymore doesn't mean to say that the people disappeared. So avoid contaminated milk until we get the all clear. I think we will get the all clear. We need to have a good period without fog, so at least 2 weeks. It takes about 10 days to get milk to market, I understand from people who know, that it kind of goes from the dairy to wherever they do their pasteurization, processing, or whatever, bottling, blah, blah, blah. And then by the time it gets to the supermarket shelf, it's about 10 days. So you would be looking for a clear period of fog for at least 2 weeks before it would be safe. But I think we will get some clear messaging, and I think it probably will be related to Arla. They might say, oh, well, we're not going to include it, or we're going to include it all. I mean, this whole new messaging that's come out about putting Arla in, or the additive in all of the milk in the UK, I think is definitely to put people off drinking it. So I'm sure it's going to work well. Or people are just going to drink it and not be too affected. Whereas if they drank something like an untreated milk or raw milk, then you might find that you'd have a bit of an upset tummy after a while. The other thing is, people think that, that you would be sick immediately. Yeah, probably you would if you drank some milk with radioactive particles in it. Yes, you would probably be sick immediately. But if it's just got high calcium, because the calcium is just going through your tummy wall straight into your bloodstream, you might not notice until levels get quite high. So you might not get sick today, but you might get sick at the end of next week or the end of the following week. So don't assume just because you're not sick now that you won't get an overload of calcium. So cutting out that added extra metal in food is useful, very, very useful. Soya, by the way, is rammed full of calcium. So that's another reason to keep away from it. If you want to see if your body responds well to a completely calcium and magnesium-free diet, added calcium and magnesium, I mean, not just completely free, because obviously it's in food, then just test out just having a completely clean diet without any of these for 3-4 weeks, and usually you will feel better. Hopefully you would feel better, unless you get sprayed from outside, then that's kind of sets you back a bit, but usually you would then recover quicker because your body is cleaner. And so do be prepared for those setbacks. Be prepared to avoid fog and gas and lightning as well. So it's a bit of a dodgems exercise at the moment. I'm going to hand over to KK and Annette, and then I'm going to open the floor to questions.
So I've been reducing my calcium over the last couple of weeks, and I have noticed a few small things that have improved. I'm 57, I'm a 57-year-old man, and I had a small amount of arthritis in my hips, and that seems to have eased off quite a bit. Have you had anything, Annette? Have you noticed any differences since you started cutting down your calcium?
I wish I did. I had something, that I could quantify. I didn't eat a lot of dairy. I just had, like I said, milk in my coffee. However, I think because we, during the foggy periods, we had a bit of brain fog going on and concentration problems. So staying out of the fog, realizing what that's doing to us, combined with no more calcium. And I don't think, I'm getting very, very, very little now. Mentally has helped, my brain.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to be a really big cheese eater. I used to have cheese every day. I used to have bread in the morning, cheese for my lunch. Then in the evening, if I had some pizza, I would even put cheese on my potatoes.
There you go. And butter, of course. A lot of people use a lot of butter as well.
I'm still using butter though.
Yeah, it's not that bad. We have to have something, don't we? But the French baguettes and petit pains with jam.
Yeah.
Then I heard the marmalade is a great option as well.
They're really good. I'm so happy that I can eat bread again.
Exactly. And I just want to mention as well, I know that pork was mentioned and pale meat, but ham fortified with phosphates is a great one as well.
How can you tell if it's fortified with phosphate in it?
It says on
Does it say on the ingredients?
Yeah, it does.
Very good. So
triphosphates that I know I probably maybe shouldn't. There's one supermarket where I go and their honey roast ham has got the phosphate in, but their organic one does not. So funny enough, I think because maybe the organic has to be, they're not allowed to add certain things. But we do want phosphates.
Well, thinking about bread, actually, I think the reason that the part-baked bread doesn't have the calcium in because it may go too hard. Because the calcium is used to make it creamy, but also to give it strength.
Could be, but it's French flour as well, isn't it? I think if you go to anywhere like Greg's and have a white baguette, or buy a white baguette in a supermarket, I think it might have to be fortified, doesn't it?
I looked at the Tesco ones.
Yeah, by law, it's all white bread made in the UK. So if it's part-baked French and pre-packaged in France, then you're okay. It doesn't have to have it.
But the English ones don't list the calcium or anything in the ingredients.
No, they don't, because it's already in the flour.
No, but even the ingredients list on the back, when it says wheat flour, it should have brackets and then have what's in it. But it doesn't do that on the part-baked breads from, I'll say Tesco's and Sainsbury's.
Well, it's interesting you say that, KK, because I've been looking at, dry dog food. I feed my dog on raw, but I did put a handful of dry food in there always. And it has some stuff in there I didn't want him to have anymore. Anyway, so most of them have a mineral analysis, actually. So they label dry dog food better than they do some of our food down to the mineral contents.
I'll try it then.
And if it has iodine, if it has iodine, it will even give you the type of iodine it has. So, maybe we've got something to learn there from them.
That's crazy.
Or our food. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a few alternatives here that we all just actually go, no, we don't want this stuff in our bread. Let's go with the 2012 decision that they were going to drop all of the added metal. The metal is the thing that we're really worried about at the moment, because that's what reacts in the cells. So, if we all just spoke to our local supermarket and put a letter in and said, no, we don't want this anymore. I think if we all did that, it would have a lot of power. We've got Brian, who's been sending letters to the big cafe chains, so 3 big cafe chains, and hopefully one of them seems to have had a bit of a flip out and has removed everything off the shelves in his store. So I don't know whether it's just his store or everywhere around the UK. KK?
That could be the response to whenever we see tweets about Arla. Just put a template letter out and say, stop putting metal in our food.
Yeah, really good. I mean, it would have to be shorter than Brian's lovely letter. It's an amazing letter, actually. It's very good. I did post it up for people to use as a template, but you can use any kind of just reasoning behind we don't need it, because, food is much better than it was. Everybody's excuse for adding stuff to food is that our soils are depleted. What are they depleted of exactly? Metal? No, I don't think they're depleted of metal at all. There's far too much metal, if anything. What they are depleted of are things like phosphate, and phosphate is what we should be focusing on. And obviously all of the all of the natural proteins that we need and the chlorophyll and everything that's really useful to us. But at the moment, our hands are tied to a certain extent because we are, the farmers put all sorts on their crops. I remember chatting to a guy who's a grain farmer here. They were at my son was at a party, and I said, oh, so what do you put on your grain crops? And he said, oh, well, all the usual stuff. And I was like, well, what? And he didn't go into details, but it was obviously a lot of stuff. And I was just like, how on earth am I knowing what you're putting in the soil before you grow the crop, on the land, to stop the weeds and insects and all of that, and then finally to finish off the crop, and then in the picking and the milling and all of that before it even gets to the flour stage. So it's worrying, and I know that the farmers are upset about the tax, the inheritance tax. But I think, now's the time for us all to go, hang on a moment. We have to look right from the soil, the air, the soil, all the way to the shelf of the store that we buy from. Because we've gone on too long like this. We can't continue especially cannot watch people like Lead Better, or whatever her name is, telling people that it's a good way to die, to be able to choose to die because you are in pain, and that you've been given 6 months to live. Given by who exactly? Who's telling you have 6 months to live? That is a better way to go than for us to sort out the mess in our fields and in our food production and in our stores and even in the raw materials that we bring home. We have to be able to get control of the metals in our diets, because that is what is killing people. That is what is causing the pain. If you are standing in a lightning storm, near a lightning storm, and you've got too much metal in your body, you will immediately know that there is pain in your body because you are full of metal. Annette and KK, sorry, I'll stop ranting now.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, the adding and the adding and the adding seems to be the solution to everything. We never really get down to the bare, the root cause with everything, because of politics, because of this, because of that. But if we keep going, I think we can. And just think about when we deem that something is wrong with us, it isn't necessarily. There are imbalances, and they can all be corrected. And some of them, it's not even that complicated to correct, even in nature,
Yeah, we just need to leave it alone, don't we? We just need to leave it alone.
Yes.
KK.
Yes.
Would it be the chief medical officer of the government who would make that recommendation for the fortification of flour? Is it a political decision or a medical one?
I think it was a civil service thing, and then they did this consultation to goodness knows how many companies. They haven't given us the list. Zara was looking for the list, and so we were sent to a report that we'd already seen, which kind of gives you a vague idea of who contributed, but doesn't give you the details of who. So the point is, a bunch of stakeholders, well over 500 stakeholders, contributed to the decision to keep this calcium and iron in the bread, in the flour, and to increase the amount to levels which are now pretty toxic, I would say. So I don't know who advised them that this was a good idea. I don't know who led them to believe that we needed such insane amounts of calcium in our diets and iron, because iron can be dangerous when it's ionized as well. And that our soil is so poorly depleted that we're getting calcium from the sky, for goodness sake. We could live off that. We don't need any extra in the food, for sure. Annette.
Well, there's the lobbying as well, isn't it? We just found today the food fortification initiative, and I looked at it very deeply, but it's quite worryingly. So there's our organizations around, and their aims and their goals is something that I hope they certainly don't achieve, and they are lobbying the government. So I think, yes, politicians, they are lobbied and they're told, and maybe they cannot find out about everything, but they're going to have to start to do that, and also not just trust these fancy initiatives that have a lot of money behind them.
These are international ones, aren't they? And they're not
they
British.
Are.
These are large international funded bodies that are making recommendations on a global level to which fortification should go in which food. And they are adding iodine to salt. They're adding all sorts to maize, to flour, to literally anything that they could shove it into. And
oil as well, they put it in.
And basically, if people are exposed to arsen gas, which many, many, many billions of us are, then those metals will do exactly what they're doing to us here in the UK. It's, sodium is still a metal. So is potassium. So is magnesium, manganese, all of those. KK.
I think in all areas of our public life, our government needs to take back control and stop farming out responsibility and their work to NGOs all over the place and essentially putting them in charge. This is part of Tony Blair's third way. It's almost fascistic, but the government needs to take responsibility, and then we hold them responsible instead of this sort of merry-go-round, who's doing what to whom and when.
We've got to the stage, though, KK, and this is what people keep saying, well, why don't the government say? Because every time the government open their mouth, everybody jumps down their throat and does the opposite. So we can't do that anymore. We have to do this. They can't do it because nobody listens to them.
And the reason they can't do it is Blair's reforms, his third way. He's made the House of Commons virtually powerless. He absolutely destroyed our constitution. It's not even clear who's in charge of our country, whether it's the government or the Supreme Court. It's this confusion about responsibility that they all play on.
Well, it's nobody has responsibility and everybody has responsibility, and they all pass it from one to the other. It's a bit of a mess, but I think that's a political thing that I think we need to leave for another time. But certainly for now, I think we need to take this initiative because it is only mass pressure on all of these, companies that we use daily, that we can say, I'm sorry, I don't like this. This is not good enough. This is making people ill. You need to do something. Or can you please talk to X, Y, and Z about taking this out? Because we don't want to buy it. Because we vote with our feet. The more people we tell this to, the more we can all vote with our feet. And then they have to do something. When their sales start to drop. I went to Asda. All the big loaves were still there. All of the French pre-packed bread was gone. Well, almost gone. I took the rest of it. So it is, the message is definitely getting out there. But we need to tell them, look, you need to do something now, because people are just going to stop buying it when they discover what it's doing to them. So Annette, go for it.
It was already covered, but I can just add something else actually, which is a little tip for those who want to check that there are some. We can't really have many biscuits at the moment because they're so fortified, but I found some lovely ones, and being from Norway, and our gingerbread thins. So Anna's gingerbread thins, they're available in the UK, and they'll be lovely for Christmas.
Yeah, there are quite a few foods. There's balsam, all sorts of foods that you can buy that are non-fortified from other countries around Europe. And the thing is, if we go for those and we don't go for the British heavily fortified ones, then at some point they will get the message. But it is, again, it's voting with our feet. It's sharing this discussion with everybody that we can. I will put it on Rumble. I know I didn't do the last one. I've just been inundated with research and new stuff coming in all the time, particularly with the weather and the new findings. But it's, I think we've got a real chance here of doing something positive for everyone. And just sharing that message with everyone. Does anybody want to speak? I've sent out some invites to speak, but you're all very quiet today. I think it's the weather. Anyway, I think I'm done for now, unless anybody's got a question. And I will put this up as soon as, it's not going to be as long, so it'll be quicker. I'll just get it straight up and not fiddle with it too much. Anything else to say, KK and Annette?
No, I think I'm done.
Yeah, no, other than, good luck everybody, looking after yourself, and yeah, we've got this.
Yeah.
And also to go by how you feel and how we feel. I do that a lot because we are all different metabolism, different this, that, and the other. So do that too. Check in with yourselves, how our advice and how recommendations sit with you and how you fare, and please share, if you can.
I've got some people want to say something now. Alex.
Oh, cool.
Alex, are you there?
Yes, I am. Just thank you so much, Caroline, and all the team who have recommended to take phosphoric acid to help our bodies guard against excessive calcium. And I don't know if you're aware, but I've had for many, many years leg twitches, which nobody seemed to understand what they were about. And I'm just going to monitor this for the next month or so. But I've just been taking Coke and also Dr. Pepper's, and I noticed that my calves have really calmed down. And I'm thinking, wow, maybe this is it. So thank you so much for your recommendations.
That's amazing, Alex. We are getting quite a few people saying that they have had, good results already. I know I certainly have. My skin has improved massively. What else so various other things I won't go into long, boring detail, but that is really, really, really fantastic. But obviously we do need to be vigilant with exposing ourselves further to all of the excesses flying around in the air. So let us know how you get on.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you, Alex. Peter. Hi, Peter. Nope, Peter's not there. Right, okay, I think that's it for now. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. And please do share this out. I will get it up as quickly as I can onto the Rumble and YouTube. I think it's something that everybody will want to listen to. It's a bit scary at times, so do refer people back to us if they want further explanation. It's difficult to explain things in detail to individuals. My pinned post has the article in the second post down that is free to read. It covers the whole, dying thing and pain and calcium and excess and how we can actually do something by cutting back. Annette, last word?
Just came to think of that if anyone's struggling with, if they feel they have imbalances and they want to supplement with something, go and see if you can find a good homeopath. I'd recommend that. I've done that for heavy metal detox. So we don't necessarily have to go to the health food shop and look for the conventional types. There are other ways that you can research to, if you have any imbalances. So just that really. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and have a good rest of the weekend. Do stay well, stay hydrated. Don't forget to focus on that phosphate and try not to overload on calcium. Okay, take care.